to this interesting event. We all live in a very different time. It's what I just heard the other day, or discussed with someone. It's the worst recession since the big recession in 1939, and that's when Americans were standing in line with food stamps. And I think some of you might have seen the pictures. So it's definitely an interesting time, and we're here to learn about these times from our distinguished panelists and get educated what we can do to come out of it.
So the VUCA world is certainly not my invention. It's been around for some time. The military has talked for a long time about this notion of VUCA, a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, things like that. So the military trains people more than any other organization in the world. They train and train and train and train and train with the knowledge that when someone actually faces combat, it is unlikely they will experience it as anything that they saw in training, no matter how good the training is, because there are all these variables, all these elements that call for immediate action, and someone has to operate in an aura of volatility and uncertainty and ambiguity. They train so much because once you've faced it a lot of times in simulation, you're better prepared to cope with what happens in a sensory way when you go out and see those kind of things for the first time. So all of us in leadership roles in the organizations in which we work are experiencing a world that has these kind of traits to it. Now, this notion of the VUCA world and how it plays out in organizations and with leaders is articulated by a group called the Institute for the Future, a person named Bob Johansen, who I've had the pleasure of interacting with 2 or 3 times. So this is Bob's work. It's presented with permission because one of the things the Institute for the Future believes is that we are rapidly finding ourselves in an open source world. Forget thinking that some of our tools and the things we work with are that special.
I think Joe's laid a wonderful groundwork in talking about leadership, because the question does emerge immediately. If you are going to have effective leaders, then they have to form, develop, and use organizations that are equally effective and reward systems within those organizations that's going to allow these leaders and those organizations to be successful in a world that is changing exponentially in terms of its knowledge, technology, speed, and what have you. And we're going to talk about organizational reward systems really being part of organization. And our focus is on giving a framework for you to appreciate the challenges and how they can be addressed.
You will find that after hearing the word VUCA tonight, maybe some of you have heard it before, it becomes a part of your vocabulary. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective, it's an adverb, and it's a cuss word. I use it very, very frequently.
Stop voking. You're voking it up.
Okay, so we're on our organization segment, and what is VUCA Ready Organization? Is it really that different from an organization in 1850? And I would tend to agree that the challenges of an organization and the challenges of any individual are different because of the things that Joe stated. I'm in full agreement that it has to do with overwhelming information accessibility. I remember in order to find out an answer to something, I spent a lot of time in a library card catalog. And the collections were small most of the time. You had to go to several libraries. Very difficult. And speed, in our talk tonight, you'll see that speed is the underlying expectation and the underlying challenge that we all have to deal with.
I work, as was mentioned earlier, I do a lot of executive coaching, and in my coaching, what I find more so now than ever, and it seems to be getting more, more prominent, are executives who are confused about direction. They come to me for strategic thinking, strategic planning. How do I sort of make sense of all of this? What, from my perspective, what we need more of, and the answer for them oftentimes is information, but it's information that leads to action. So I'm going to talk about data and analytics that can help you get clarity and get you into action in a way that, frankly, on our own, the way our brains work. And if you know anything about brain research, we create these mental models that are parked in our head in different places where we put together scenarios, situations. We see the situation a second time, we go, ah, I remember that. I push button A and B happens. I see the hot plate. I'm not going to touch it because I'll get burned. In this day and age, we're seeing less and less of that kind of predictability.
So, being a human resources guy, dealing with international HR for all these years, multiple countries, languages, cultures, locations, foods, we got into a discussion about this VUCA thing. I said, well, what's that mean? Venezuela, Uruguay, Canada, Argentina? No, it was Joe's definition. And we started talking about this volatility and uncertainty and complexity and so on. I said, so what's new about that, to your point, sir? What's new about that? I've been living La Vida VUCA for many, many years. Anita picked up on that because she liked that Ricky Martin hit from a few years ago, Living La Vida Loco. Well, VUCA and Loco are basically the same thing, right? Similar. So that's where this title came from, just for your benefit.
I was actually quoting you, but it's okay.
Well, it's one of those things, whenever I stand up and start talking, you never know what's going to come out of the mouth. So let's start out, put you back to work again. This time, instead of watching a video, let me pose a question. What are some ideas about globalization? What is the truest definition? You're always good for something. Thoughts?
Constantly changing the definition.
Okay, constant change is part of it. Multiple countries, perhaps?
Expansion of markets and
Perfect.
customers and employees across the globe.
Yeah, great, thank you. Well, here's the right answer. And of course, you're now sitting there going, huh? What's this guy on about? Can you read that in the back row? Mike, keep.
I'm going to read it out loud.
Should I read it?
Yeah, read it.
Please? The answer is, an English princess with an Egyptian boyfriend crashes in a French tunnel, driving a German car, double, with a Dutch engine, driven by a Belgian who was drunk on Scottish whiskey, and of course, parenthetical, check the bottle before you change the spelling, followed closely by Italian paparazzi on Japanese motorcycles treated by an American doctor using Brazilian medicines. And that when this was typed up, it was written by a Canadian using Bill Gates technology. You're probably reading this on your computer that uses Taiwanese-made chips and a Korean monitor assembled by Bangladeshi workers in a Singapore plant, transported by Indian lorry drivers, hijacked by Indonesians, or perhaps Somalian pirates, unloaded by Sicilian longshoremen, and trucked to you by undocumented Mexican drivers.